When you think about the most important technologies in human history, your mind probably jumps to fire or the wheel. But what if I told you that one of the most transformative technologies we ever harnessed is probably bubbling away in your refrigerator right now? We are talking about fermentation, and it is so much more than just pickles or beer. It is, without a doubt, a foundational biotechnology that literally shaped the world we live in today.
So, let's just start with a big question here. What do you think is our species' oldest and most influential biotechnology? And I mean, forget silicon chips, forget genetic engineering just for a second. Think more alive. The answer is something our ancestors mastered thousands of years before they even had a clue about the science behind it.
And that right there is the beautiful part. Fermentation wasn't invented in some ancient lab. No, it was discovered, most likely completely by accident, when someone left some fruit or grain or milk out and noticed it had transformed into something new. Something kind of profound. This was our very first partnership with the microbial world, a dance with a totally invisible force.
So, our journey really begins with what you could call an accidental revolution. Just try to picture it. Our distant ancestors, maybe they're hunter-gatherers, they're storing some surplus grains or fruits, and in just the right conditions, the wild yeasts that are just floating in the air would get to work and, voila, the contents would start to bubble and change. That first taste of this transformed food, it must have been an absolute revelation, not just for the flavor, but for its, shall we say, intoxicating effects.
What is so remarkable is just how ancient and widespread this discovery was. I mean, we've got evidence of a beer-like brew from a cave in Israel that dates back 13,000 years. And this wasn't some isolated thing. Around 10,000 years ago in China, people were already making rice wine. 1,000 years after that, they were making a complex mixed drink of rice, honey, and fruit. And by 7,000 years ago, you have the Sumerians in Mesopotamia brewing beer systematically. It just popped up all over the world completely independently. It's like humanity everywhere was learning to work with microbes.
But pretty soon, this discovery evolved from just a lucky accident into a repeatable, reliable craft. This is the story of how we went from just observing fermentation to actively controlling it. Taming that invisible force to do what we wanted it to, all without ever seeing a single microbe.
And listen, this wasn't just, leaving some mush in a pot and hoping for the best. Not at all. Take the Sumerians. They had something called the Hymn to Ninkasi, which is this beautiful ancient poem, but it's also basically a recipe for beer. It describes this incredibly sophisticated process. It involved a special beer bread called bapir, malting grain, carefully mashing it all together. This wasn't guesswork. It was a refined technological process, an algorithm for brewing that was passed down through generations.
At the same time, over in Asia, a totally different technological leap was happening with something called Jiahu, or liquor mother. And this thing is a brilliant invention. See, Western brewing needed two separate steps. First, you had to convert the grain starches into sugars, and then you could ferment those sugars. Jiahu combines both steps into one. The molds in this starter cake break down the starches, while the yeast, at the same time, turns those new sugars into alcohol. It's an incredibly efficient little bioreactor, perfected thousands of years ago.
The level of control they achieved just shows incredible ingenuity. They didn't have thermometers, so they controlled temperature by touch, by feel, moving pots into the sun or into the shade. The Georgians, they buried these enormous clay pots called quaveries to use the Earth's stable temperature for perfect wine fermentation. They understood that the right kind of pot mattered, and they even practiced basic sanitation, using boiling water to prevent bad batches. This was pure applied science based on nothing but observation and repetition.
But this technology wasn't just for having a good time. The reason it was so vital, the reason it stuck around, is that it solved some of the most fundamental life-or-death challenges of ancient life.
Think about it. Before modern sanitation, water was often deadly. It could kill you. But beer and wine, they were safe because the alcohol killed off the dangerous pathogens. In a world with no refrigerators, how do you survive a long, harsh winter? Well, you ferment your food. You turn milk into cheese, cabbage into sauerkraut. And on top of all that, the process actually made the food more nutritious.
And that nutritional boost was an absolute game changer. The process of fermentation can dramatically increase the vitamin content of food. For instance, studies that replicate ancient methods have shown that the amount of vitamin B1 in a grain-based food could shoot up by a staggering 75% after fermentation. For survival, that is a massive advantage.
Okay, so we can see how it solved these critical problems for survival, but the impact gets even bigger. This technology didn't just help individuals survive, it actually became a cornerstone of civilization itself. It fundamentally changed how societies were structured and how they grew.
Now here's an idea that is truly mind-bending. Some anthropologists believe that the desire for a steady, reliable supply of beer wasn't just a byproduct of agriculture. It might have been the reason for it. It's called the beer before bread hypothesis. It suggests we settled down and started farming not just to eat, but to drink. The thirst for fermented drinks may have literally kick-started civilization as we know it.
And once we did settle down, fermented products were just woven into the very fabric of society. They became valuable trade goods shipped across entire continents. They were even a form of currency. I mean, the laborers who built the Great Pyramids in Egypt were paid in rations of beer. Feasts with wine and beer reinforced social bonds and the power of the elites. And almost everywhere you look, these drinks were seen as sacred, a bridge to the divine, and central to the most important religious rituals.
And make no mistake, this became a serious industry. In Mesopotamia, starting 7,000 years ago, brewing was way more than a home craft. By 4000 BC, records show they were producing at least 16 distinct varieties of beer. That kind of diversity tells you there was a sophisticated market, with specialized producers, picky consumers, and a whole complex supply chain. It was a real engine of the ancient economy.
So this brings us to the legacy of this ancient craft. What started as just a chance discovery has echoed through thousands of years, and its impact is more present today than you could possibly imagine.
You know, when you really stop and think about it, these ancient brewers and vintners and bakers, they were the world's first biohackers. Through nothing but pure trial and error, they learned to manipulate these incredibly complex ecosystems of yeast and bacteria. They mastered a partnership with an invisible world, long before we had the tools to even see it. It's just an incredible testament to human ingenuity.
And that ancient partnership is the direct ancestor of so much of our modern science. Of course, you've got the massive global food and beverage industry, but it goes so much deeper. Our whole understanding of probiotics and gut health comes directly from this lineage. The discovery of antibiotics began with observing mold. Modern biotechnology, which produces everything from biofuels to life-saving medicines, all of it stands on the shoulders of that first brewer who figured out how to tame the yeast.
So the takeaway here is this. Our first ancient partnership with the microbial world didn't just give us tasty bread and wine, it helped build civilization itself. It solved critical problems, it reshaped our entire society, and it laid the groundwork for modern science. Which, of course, leaves us with one final thought. Our first great partnership with the invisible world built our civilization. What will our next one create?